As the journey to the rise of Skywalker continues, it's time to give you my thoughts on Star Wars: The Phantom Menace. Hello everyone, I hope you're having a cinematastic day. I'm Josh, this is Simply Cinema, and before we get into my thoughts, I'd love to hear yours down in comments below. What do you think of this film? Was it good? Was it bad? Is it living up to how the Star Wars universe is continuing off from the original trilogy? And is it a good start to the prequel trilogy? Make sure to like this video and subscribe if you're new here, because we're continuing the journey to the rise of Skywalker with all the Star Wars reviews, and there will be a playlist that you can check right up there in the corner if you missed any of the other ones after this review. But without further ado, let's begin. Star Wars: The Phantom Menace kicks off the prequel trilogy with the story of Anakin Skywalker being a young boy, having to grow up as a slave, but he is soon rescued by the Jedi Knights of Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi, and with all the Republic and all of the democracy and all of the Jedi Order that is suddenly involved within the past of the Star Wars universe. There's a growth in the story of Anakin, and it all leads up to finding out that there's suddenly an emergence of Sith Lords in their presence. Starting with the positives, I'm just gonna come out right up and say that this film is extremely underrated, as some of the moments are just really enjoyable. I was never really offended by Jar Jar Binks' character, how he acts. His quirkiness in his character is just really fun. Anakin as a young boy is still understandably childish as he acts, and just the characters and how they interact, Padme and Qui-Gon Jinn, as Liam Neeson in his role is really done, and is somewhat short-lived for only being in this film, unfortunately, but it's still a really enjoyable character for the moments he does have. And having Ewan McGregor as Obi-Wan Kenobi is a great fit, especially as we get into the next two films of the prequel trilogy. But even in this one, he still has his moments, as he's still not necessarily a huge main character yet. He's still the apprentice of Qui-Gon, and that's what makes him work as a character well. Given that this is technically now titled Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, it works well as the original film, and I would say even if you skipped the original trilogy and started with the prequel trilogy and watched in chronological order of the Star Wars universe time, it still works well as a good film that sets up and does the world building just right, because you get a few different planets, you get a variety of species and different culture aspects, and seeing the pod racing scene is just really fun and entertaining. It's presenting a sport and is done in just the right way, and used within the story, not just as a side gimmick, but is used in order to bring Anakin into the Jedi Order, and used to bring him in places that he wouldn't otherwise be in, with a slave on Tatooine by Watto. And just the way everything intertwines together, is meshed together, is just really fun and is enjoyable. And the way it introduces Sidious as the bad guy, with trying to be mysterious, if you haven't watched the original trilogy to know who he is, then it's just done really well in showing the emergence of them. And as the Jedi Council doesn't know about them, it's showing he has a secret plan that is done well enough that keeps him hidden. And also the introduction of his apprentice Darth Maul is done really well, and brings into a very epic battle at the end with the Duel of Fates, with him versus Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan Kenobi. And it's just done really well. It brings out a really good music score, not just within that, but throughout the whole film. It's entertaining to hear that music flow through the movie, and that throughout the culture, the characters, the cast, and just a lot of different aspects about this film. While it's not over the top great, I just cannot say that I hate it or even dislike it. It's really enjoyable as it is, and I like it that way. Moving on to the negatives, I just have more of mixed responses to this movie rather than real negatives, but there's quite a bit of them as we get the politics within Star Wars. It's definitely a different feel for Star Wars. What we get, it's more real worldly, which makes me sort of enjoy and see more of the relatable consequences of the movie and how all the war works out within the prequels. And some of the dialogue is a bit goofy, the way all of it's portrayed, but none of it has really worked to offend me or not really enjoy this film. And while it seems to include subplots that aren't necessarily super crucial to the plot of the story, the main problem I have with this film is just the way that it doesn't start off with Anakin, and this is more of Anakin's origin story, so it takes a little bit of time just to get to Anakin's story, and the way his story flows out to being in Tatooine still for a little while before he gets to go to the Jedi Order, and then he only gets so much screen time after that being on the planet. The way it all works out, still using him as a kid by the end of the film, works well and works for me, but it overall isn't super beneficial to showing even more of his origin story of how he later becomes Darth Vader. But those were just my personal thoughts on this film, and I'd love to hear yours down in comments below. Let me know what you thought of this film. Was it good? Was it bad? Or somewhere in between? And how does it line up as the original movie to the prequel trilogy? Of course, to make sure like this video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe if you're new here, and make sure to check out some of these other videos. We have the Star Wars playlist of all the other reviews I got out, and we'll be continuing the journey to Rise of Skywalker with the rest of the reviews, along with a video that YouTube suggests specifically for you. Make sure to check that out if you haven't already, and I'll be back for more movie reviews, rankings, and more on the way.